expected to do. I know Dr. Chamberlain will speak more about getting our attempts to get firm numbers a little bit later. I can tell you that, right now, it says in the packet here, as of October 4th, it was like 50% vaccinated, 50% uncertain or not reported. We know that from speaking with the union yesterday, that some people just were not comfortable sending their information through zip slip, which was the original way that we had asked them to do it. But we had also told them at the same time that if they didn't want to do that, they could also supply their information to their school nurse. And many just haven't done that. So we're working to get an accurate number. We know from the numbers of people that went and got vaccinated last year, we have a pretty good approximation that number is extremely high. But until we can physically see the actual document, the actual, card, we don't want to come out with a real number. I mean, it would be easy for us to take the amount of people that we know took a day to go get vaccinated and divide it, right, and just come up with a percentage. But we want to actually visually see and confirm the vaccination card. So we're working to get to that number. But I don't believe, Dr. McCrillis, to your question, I do not believe that was the case.
Okay.
Through the chair, I actually just have one question, just because you brought up winter activities.
Sure.
And the number of close contacts being kind of high in this last
Yep.
debate with the high school. However, a lot of those kids are all eating outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a plan to, I guess, more closely monitor what's happening at lunchtime as we move indoors?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Just because I know
Yeah.
right now they're on the field, so you kind of
Yeah,
probably wouldn't need
no,
to
that's a
monitor
great.
that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and so that's part of the what we're continuing to monitor is we're looking at, as you know, Dr. Chamberlain and I were at the high school exclusively over the last week or so, and it gave us an opportunity to really do some observations, and come away with some wonderings, and we're working through that right now with the high school administration. But yes, I anticipate that there's going to be, some changes in practice to guard against, as we start to move more indoors. I do believe the high school administration has already started addressing the student body around proper mask wearing, et cetera, in terms of, what will turn around and become, kind of standard operating procedure in the hallways and classrooms and cafeteria. That's yet to be determined, but that conversation is happening now with the anticipation of cooler weather coming.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments? Seeing none, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've talked about this a couple of times already relative to special town meeting. Just as a reminder, on October the 26th, we are having a special town meeting. I have given to you the full warrant articles from the town, and there's also the three that we have in place. Article 5, relative to the proposed parking lot expansion / kind of traffic reconfiguration at Bryn Mawr. We are postponing indefinitely until May. The reason for that is what we're trying to do is we're trying to take monies that were appropriated at town meeting last May for building rehab and maintenance that was going to go toward HVAC accelerated repairs, and we're trying to repurpose that money and put it towards this project at Bryn Mawr. The issue that we're having right now is that that money hasn't been borrowed yet, and we can't go to town meeting and ask them to repurpose money we don't have yet. So we're kind of in this a little bit, I don't want to say a quandary, but we're kind of just a little bit, we're just trying to figure out what's the right approach to deal with that at this time. So we just legally, we can't go forward and ask town meeting or make a presentation because of the way it's set up. So we have unanimous approval for the other two articles, which is the reduction in Medicaid from 150 to 100, and then the additional monies that have come in for homeless transportation from both Select and Finance. So those two should be fine, but we'll postpone indefinitely on the other, and we'll work out the logistics of it with town administration and appropriate boards, and we'll look at it in May. It's not a big deal for us to postpone this indefinitely. The money that we're looking at replacing the building repair and maintenance is in the ESSER 3 that we've talked about before, that those funds have been right now kind of, put aside. And those funds don't have to be expended until June of '24. So we have time to work through this a little bit. So everything should be fine on that front. Just continued discussion to make sure we follow the appropriate procedures and processes. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
I do have a question on that.
Go ahead, Gil.
Dr. Hanfield, I drove by Bryn Mawr School the other
Sure.
day, and everywhere you look, there's no parking signs.
Right.
So is this parking lot for parents to pick up
Sure.
their children? Is that what the problem is?
Yeah, so it's really there's a couple issues here. One is the amount of vehicles that are parked on either side of the road during arrival and dismissal. So that's a real safety concern for traffic trying to pass through. So that's one issue. The second issue is that we have an ADA, American with Disabilities Act study that was conducted, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. Predates my existence in this chair. But we were looking at the Bryn Mawr facility, and as we were looking at making sure that the ADA rules and regulations and Bryn Mawr was compliant, we need some additional handicap parking in that area. So we already have some monies, as you know, set aside for parking lot expansion. So with the ESSER 3 monies coming in and having money in there targeted for HVAC repair, or at least that's some of the kind of the finite uses that we can utilize those funds for, it gave us the idea that if we could take the building repair money appropriated last May, that we could perhaps deal with 2 issues at the same time, but it wouldn't cost the town. If town meeting appropriated it, it wouldn't cost them, the parking lot expansion and the HVAC. So what we're looking to do is expand the parking lot to address some of the ADA concerns, put more parking in there to help alleviate partly the parking on the side streets. That's why all the no parking signs are there. But the other concern that we have is, what do we do with those vehicles, right? So at the Bryn Mawr ball field site, for years and years and years, cars have always parked kind of in that grassy strip that runs somewhat perpendicular to the field. What we'd like to do is, go through the appropriate channels. We'd like to pave that and make it an actual parking lot, and then we'd like to run a couple of lanes parallel to 395 that would then tie into the Bryn Mawr driveway. So families could come in and stage their vehicles in that parking area, but they could also stage them in kind of that, what would look like a C going on the outside of the athletic fields. We're not looking or proposing that we're to, pave that entire area. We're just looking to find a way to help the parking issue, but then extend it around so that it would give vehicles an opportunity. Parents could queue in that field area and then come out onto the road. So we feel it makes sense. It's not necessarily a traffic piece per se. It's just more of, it's just messy during different times of the day. The other part of it too is that we feel it could have benefit, if they're as an overflow parking site for Swanson Road. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes in. People think when we say Bryn Mawr Swanson Road, it's really Bryn Mawr. But doing that work would allow Swanson Road to have some overflow parking. And it would also, I think, allow the townspeople, an area to where they could walk on a paved surface if, in off hours. So there's a variety of uses for it, but we're just trying to capitalize on what we think is a need. And that's really what it is. So it started as the parking lot expansion, but then as we started looking at things that were really highlighted by COVID and the excessive traffic in that area, we thought that this might be an appropriate way to address it.
So until that happens, what do the parents do that are going there to pick up their children?
Well, if you drive kind of over where the Montessori building is, or you go up some side streets, you see vehicles dumped there. Even though those signs are up, they have nowhere to go. And so.
And those aren't official signs anyhow. Those are look more
well,
like.
The police department put those up.
Oh, they did.
They did. Yes, they put those up. Just because last spring it was untenable. I mean, cars were everywhere. Buses couldn't get up or down. People who were trying to, proceed through the area, were just getting gridlocked in traffic. It's just a difficult spot, and it has been for a really long time. And it
And with
really.
little kids, you can't just have them walk wherever. A lot
correct.
of times, I'm sure the parents want to
Correct.
hold their child's hand and walk
Yeah.
them to the car.
Yeah, and the difficulty with it too, when that switched from being a middle school to an intermediate school, the timing of parental arrival really just went back to back, whereas you had a longer, period of time between the two schools, arrival and
Oh.
drop off. So you didn't have the saturation in the area at those different times of the day, So we're just trying to get, somewhat creative and, try to handle a need that we think would benefit the schools, but could also benefit the community, the town. When they have different events, they're always looking for overflow parking areas. So we're just, we're just trying to be creative and proactive.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Also, in a previous meeting, we talked about the generosity of Staples and that they had donated 500 pencil boxes full of school supplies to Bryn Mawr and Packagug. Last Friday, Staples did donate another 600 pencil boxes full of school supplies to Swanson Road Intermediate School. And within each pencil box, there were 19 different items. So, again, just a huge thank you to Staples. Again, a huge thank you to Kristen Pappas, who picked them all up for us and dropped them off.
Great.
And we have a lot of very happy children who are receiving free pencil boxes with supplies. So we thank Staples again for their generosity, and for a lot of kids, it's a big deal. And so just a great thing for them to do, and couldn't be more thankful for their involvement in the community.
That's excellent. I
Need
would
a motion?
entertain
Yeah,
a
so
motion to recommend.
I'll make a motion to accept the donation of 1,100 pencil box from Staples with gratitude.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that?
Thank you.
That's just wonderful.
Yeah. Just a big thank you to Staples. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. It is a vote. And we now move on to new business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, November the 3rd is this year's MASC-MASS Joint Conference. The conference begins late Wednesday afternoon, November the 3rd, and there's a conflict with our next scheduled meeting, which is November 3rd. So it would be my recommendation that after looking at the calendar and consulting with Dr. Chamberlain and talking with Mrs. Wisbicki, that we cancel the November 3rd meeting, and we meet at our next scheduled meeting date, which would be November the 17th. And so I just need a motion to strike that, and we would alter the calendar on the internet and let Town Hall know.
I would entertain that motion.
Make a motion to strike November 3rd from the school committee meeting schedule and resume meeting on November 17th.
Do I have
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Aye. It is a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That's it for me right now.
All right,
Thank
we
you.
now move on to teaching and learning. Dr. Chamberlain?
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all again. Seems like it's been a while. I just wanted to share with you, October 12th, we had our but since school began, professional day. It was focused for the majority of professional staff on universal design for learning. It was very exciting to be talking about something and immersed in something other than COVID, quite frankly, even though I know each day there's lots of teaching and learning happening in schools. But the feedback was great, and it's really our first session on something that's going to be a 3-year journey for us to really change how we provide all kids with what they need each day in class. So a lot of great things there. There was a lot of specialized instruction. Our guidance counselors got some training in dialectical behavioral therapy, which is something we continue to focus on, social emotional learning. Some of them worked on some events and some planning for things to happen in school related to that, some specialized things around autism, so it was really a very good day. It was held all virtually. We had hoped we could have it in person, but we just thought it was a little bit too risky to bring all our staff together. So it was virtual, but it was great. So that was a really good day. Mcas results were released on September 21st. As I don't think is a surprise to anyone, students did not score as well as they did in 2019. I almost am not sure we needed the data to tell us that would indeed be the fact.
No.
But nonetheless, we did get the data. It is on the back of one of your sheets in the packet. Auburn students still outperform the state in all areas.
Excellent.
So that's great. Do we have work to do? Absolutely we do. Do we have kids with learning loss and gaps? Absolutely we do. But teachers are working really diligently. Desi has provided us with some guidance around an accelerated learning strategy. There's been a lot of studies done when big things happen in places like Hurricane Katrina. When that happened, the schools really took a remediation stance, and that's what they did. So if kids were now supposed to be in 5th grade, they were really backing up through much of 4th grade before they got to the 5th grade material. And what happened was the gap just became bigger and bigger. And so we have to continue to expose our kids to grade level material. We have to be thoughtful about what grade level material we're really focusing on, those most important things. And then we have to provide some remediation. But we have to be careful to just not stop and say we need to redo last year, because our kids are never going to get to where they need to. So teachers are working through that in teams and in content area groups to make sure that we're being as efficient with the content as we can, yet recognizing that kids do need some backfilling of skills that they missed from last year. And as I say all that, the priority remains the social emotional well-being of our kids. Because what we're also seeing is an uptick in some behaviors and, kids really reaching out for help. And we now know that the learning has to come secondary, because we can't force the learning if they're not in a place that they're ready to learn. So we're very grateful that we have the additional social worker staff and guidance counselors that can address that. And we're doing the very best we can. But it's a very stressful time for kids, and it's a very stressful time for staff. So we keep talking about it. Casey and I bring it up every time we meet with the principals, that's got to be first. We have to make sure that kids feel safe, supported, and get their, those primary needs met. So, any questions on any of that?
I'm just going to make a comment. There's been a lot of talk around the state and elsewhere that we shouldn't be doing MCAS testing. Way back in the old days when I started teaching, we used to do I think it was the Iowa test of basic skills.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it in September or October. So we got results right then and there of where our students were, and you could go over them and see what you needed to do to improve the particular child's skills. And I remember having meetings with other teachers on the team and working on that. MCAS is okay, but it comes at the end. And I thought, I think it was like 93 when they decided to give us extra money. MCAS came about because they wanted to make sure we were using the money wisely, and the way they did it was to test us and compare us with other districts. But if we ever have to give up MCAS and we can go back to something like a test of basic skills,
Sure.
I think we'd really be able to serve our students in many ways in a better way. Because if the teachers are really, I'm getting a vote from the back, if the teachers are really involved with their students and looking after them, that really gives you information you can use to better their skills, as opposed to a blanket needs improvement or whatever they get nowadays.
Without making
Yeah.
the kids feel like they don't know anything.
Right.
Yeah.
And I will say that MCAS is not a major player in what drives our instruction.
Good.
All of our classroom teachers have methods, right? It varies by level on how they gather initial information on what kids know and what they don't know and what they need to know. And that happens in a variety of ways. You know, at the primary, we use Dibble's assessment. Through Swanson Road, we now have iReady, which we've had for several years, and last year we expanded it from ELA to math as well. These are very evidence-based programs that provide a lot of good feedback. At the middle school and at the secondary, they have a lot of pre and post tests that they've set up, and those the pre-tests are designed for just that. What do these kids know and what don't they know, and what do I need to, really focus on for them? So we have a lot of things in place in the district. There's been a lot of time spent on that because we know, MCAS is information, right? It's a data point. It tells us something, but when it comes, how it comes, doesn't give us a lot of good time to use it,
No.
right? So we do have methods in place to make sure that we do that. And
That's
our
good,
teachers are
because-
really good at doing it.
The kids really deserve to be helped
Yeah.
when they need it.
Correct,
Which
correct.
is
And through
during
the-
the course of the school year,
Yeah,
not
and
after
through-
the
And
fact.
through the chair, first of all, it's hard to disagree with my former English teacher, my former math teacher. I agree with you both, so thank you. But I will say that, what we, I mean, every district uses MCAS slightly differently. What we use it for is to look at established themes and trends over a period of time. So if we're seeing cohorts of kids, because people, the common criticism you get is right. You get this information on kids, you get it in, August of, and those kids are gone.
Yeah.
What we really use that data for is to identify trends. So if, for example, we see, 3 years of children not identifying author's point of view, if we see the fact, that, the question on, just for the sake of example, Pythagorean theorem, kids blow that 3 years in a row. That then gives us pause to say, well, clearly we're not doing something right if we're seeing this trend happen over a number of years. So we use it in that regard. It also helps us identify, our subgroups, right? So we look at special education, we look at our English language learners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, the same thing. It's trend analysis. If we see they're not doing well over a period of a couple, 3 years, then that gives us pause to say, okay, we're not doing something right because these 3 classes of kids are not doing well. To Dr. Chamberlain's point, right, so that's how we kind of look at MCAS and use that.
Yeah.
But to your point, which is very well taken, instead of doing, say, in Iowa, or we may have even done the CATs at some point, or the Metropolitan, whatever they were. I remember sitting in the cafeteria taking them as a 6th grader
Okay.
and 3rd grader, so I know exactly, I remember it. Instead of doing something like that, which some school districts still do, we've instead decided to do our own homegrown assessments, our pre and post tests. Elementary's actually, in our meeting today, they're actually having their benchmark, their pre-test for the year. They were having their benchmark meetings on kids today.
Oh, good.
And then we'll start establishing, as Dr. Chamberlain said, where are those gaps with kids and how do we effectively get them to where they need to be and accelerate them rather than think about it in a deficit way, which is to say, well, they've lost. We hear learning loss. We hear all that type of stuff. In some cases, sure, but, we think of it more as acceleration. And our kids are resilient. And I think, to these MCAS scores that you see here, yeah, we did perform above the state. And, when you look at different pockets of things, of course, we didn't do well in certain areas because the kids weren't in school for 18 months.
Right.
But compared to, compared to where we could be, we're really pleased with the effort in the results, and it's kudos to our faculty and our
Yes.
staff who, under very difficult circumstances, still stepped up, and clearly something got into kids' heads because if MCAS didn't show us anything, it shows us that they exhibited knowledge in areas that they need to exhibit knowledge in. So yeah, but that's a great point, and yeah, we don't define ourselves by MCAS.
Good.
But it's just another data point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you. I did share some information, this goes back to the beginning of October, it hasn't changed much, that's why it didn't change since then, around the vaccination status of students and staff. We'll continue to monitor this, we continue to try and find ways that are accessible for folks. We have found that some folks just don't want to reveal what that is, and that's everyone's choice, but we will continue to push on that. Dr. Hanfield and I are working on that, trying to make folks, if they want to go through the school nurse, they can do that. It doesn't have to be through zip slip. That was just the most, kind of the most efficient way for everybody. But we'll continue to work on that, and hopefully our numbers will rise. I do know that seemingly several parents, and I've talked to a lot of parents as I'm kind of the nursing assistant for phone calls sometimes, who have said, I told him to go, he's going to get an appointment, we're going to get him to go, kind of thing. So there is some pressure there to keep kids in school by the families, and they are taking them. So hopefully that will change.
Through the chair, I just have to say, and I know I'm very pro-vaccine, but for our kindergartners, they have to provide vaccine status in dental, like you've had a dental cleaning. So and I never realized that teachers didn't have to provide that information.
Yeah.
Because, we could have an immunocompromised child in the classroom whose chemo has wrecked their immune system, and if the teacher isn't vaccinated, that's a danger. So I guess I'm just shocked by that, but
Yeah.
I guess that's just, I guess I just never knew. And I know that there's a lot of other things going on behind the scenes that are something I just don't know. I'm just shocked that we don't get that info on teachers. And I do know that Worcester, if they're not vaccinated, they have to test weekly with PCR tests starting sometime in November. I didn't know if that was something we could think about going forward. Obviously, you have a lot on your plates. I just would be remiss, the public health piece of me, if I didn't say. I just think, we check to make sure kids' teeth are clean, but
Through the chair, I totally agree. I was really saddened, honestly, just by the staff numbers, only because I see how hard you guys are working. This is all you've done for 18 months. You probably don't have slept in 18 months. So, and if there's anything we can do, I mean, God, you want us to give you lunch once a week? Like, what incentive would it take, especially because our kids have less agency over whether they can get it, but our teachers do. So, if there is a thing that we can do, you name it. I mean,
Well, I think.
because I was just,
Yeah, well, and through the chair, you raise a good point, but and to Dr. McCrillis's point, I appreciate that point of view, and yes, I mean, we're knee deep in it, without question. There are a lot of moving pieces to this behind the scenes.
right, exactly.
We tried, to ask them, to give us the information. Conspiracy theorists, are still out there thinking that, in some parts of the universe, this will be used against them. It's not. And so then that brought me to a different line of, I guess, questioning and discussion with the union earlier this week. And so I'm hopeful that we can set up somewhere where people feel comfortable, letting us know one way or the other what it is. The difficulty we have, it would be easy for us to pick this information if everybody lived in Auburn, but they don't. And so, the other way for us to pick this information, because legally, there's well-established precedents that we can ask for this information, and it needs to be supplied. And so that's what we're working through right now, the proper channels to get that information. With respect to making a mandate that all folks need to be vaccinated, or if not, they need to test weekly. It's a bit of a slippery slope as it relates to collective bargaining. I understand, people will say to me, well, the governor did it and this and that. I get that. But this is a very difficult issue, and we have to be very respectful of all sides as it relates to, mandating vaccinations or mandating testing or things of that nature. There's a lot of pieces to it. And so, we're very much aware of that, and we're continuing, that's another part of the discussion, as I said earlier, relative to building operations that are being discussed. But we want to make sure that it's, and I know you do too, so I don't mean to imply that you're not. But we want to make sure that this is handled thoughtfully, that this is handled, empathically, and that we're not offending our teaching staff. But at the same time, we do understand that there needs to be some assurances, to the extent possible that, that our kids are going to be safe in classrooms with teachers. So that conversation will continue, and I suspect, as we have done in the past, we have demonstrated our ability to work with the teachers in a manner that both sides are happy and satisfied with whatever the issue is. And so I'm sure we will bring this to resolution sooner rather than later. But it is very much at the forefront of our minds, and we were in a discussion with as early as yesterday about
under
it.
the chair, if it matters at all, if it comes down to just not wanting to be just split into vaccinated versus not, and pool testing is an option for all staff, just as a regular on every 2 weeks or something at different schools. It seems like anything would be better than nothing, and if that would make it less invasive feeling than
Yeah, well, and-
you, Mr. Not Vaccinated person, you
Yeah.
gotta swab up your nose.
But
I know that some corporations are doing that because they don't want to ask, but they need people to come back into
Sure.
their buildings, so.
And I understand, and I appreciate that sentiment, but we're also talking too about collectively bargained contracts and working conditions and things like that. And so, you know, there's that element of it that we're working through. There's also that element of, you're right, you know, the stigma that some people may feel being vaccinated, or, oh, you're not vaccinated. I'm seeing, just the fallout that we're seeing at the high school is very messy right now. It's uncomfortable, and quite frankly, it's sad. And what I don't want is we're in the middle of putting that back together, and what I don't want is to see a fracture take place between the central office administration and folks in our buildings around this issue. So that's why I want to make sure that we're handling it in a very delicate manner, but one that's expeditious, and that's where we're headed right now. So I do believe the test and stay that we have in place has been a tremendous asset. Our teachers, you know, it's open to all of our teachers. We've had teachers that have asked, hey, you know, I had a child in my classroom that was positive. They're not a close contact. You know, can I go get tested? Absolutely. Go down and go ahead. And so I think as more people are being understanding what that process looks like too, I think that might help move this a little bit further along. This discussion really was geared to take place in September relative to how we approach, you know, the staffing with this. But with the test and stay being delayed 2.5 months, it was hard to really have a thoughtful discussion around, you know, options. You know, the city of Worcester had test and stay in place very early, whereas we did not. And so I'm hopeful now that that's in place and people are seeing how that works, that's going to help us push this conversation along, so that we can have some assurances that I think would make everybody maybe feel a little bit better.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'd just like to add that whatever you end up having to do, I support you. I was appalled by these numbers. I'm glad to hear they might be higher.
I really do, through the chair. I really do think they are. You know, this, like, again, I can't underscore how complex this issue is with some people. And when I mean some people, I mean people that were asking for this information. I don't mean you, obviously.
Yeah.
You all understand. You know, but some of when we started really digging into what's going on, we know that these numbers are higher. Why aren't we being able to validate it?
Sure.
The things that were coming back to us, I was really surprised. I was surprised that the number of folks that were not comfortable putting it into ZipSlip. Why, I don't know, but I understand and I respect their opinion, whatever, or feelings, and I think that's the place that we're operating from right now, is that we don't want to lose that mutual respect for people's feelings on this issue, and so that's what we're doing. We're in the process now of trying to tease through that and figure out how we get that information. So, but we'll get it. We'll get it.
So we might get another report in a couple weeks on this, or?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, Beth and I, you know, our plan is to, in the conversation, you know, the conversations that have been had would be that we would get this information, you know, as close to November 1st as possible. And then that, because we do need to send this information to the state as well. So.
Uh-oh. I don't think
Sorry.
anybody was in it.
Sorry about that. That's okay. We'll deal with that later. Yeah. So we're aiming to have this information as close to November 1st as possible. We should definitely. I mean, by the next time we meet, November the 17th, we should definitely have that and some other discussion around some of the issues that we talked about tonight. So
Okay.
we're continuing to work on it.
I agree, Gail. I thought that the numbers would be a little bit higher, and also I can understand where you're coming from, Dr. McCrillis, and even Dr. Hanfield, and the way that you need to handle this. This whole thing has been divisive enough throughout the state, throughout the country. I don't think we need to divide any more within our schools. So I'm sure that you're handling that quite well. And I understand. I don't understand the lack of vaccinations, but I do, as you said, I also appreciate that everyone has a right. And they also have a right to be able to come to school and not be scrutinized by the other 6 people in the teacher's room or the other 3 people in their classroom. And I've seen that. Well, what do you mean you're not vaccinated? Why wouldn't you get vaccinated? Well, they might have a number of reasons why they didn't want to be vaccinated, and that's going to cause a rift within the schools. That's the last thing that we need around our students, and especially when we're trying to keep things rolling through this COVID period. I totally understand your point, though. If that was my child,
Yeah.
Meg,
But then again,
would-
I have to say, I work in healthcare, so I
Right.
can't,
the
I don't
only
work
s-
as a teacher, so
I think the only
trust
saving
them.
grace that we
Yeah.
have with that is, actually all staff, but especially our nursing staff are doing a phenomenal job on following up on everything. And I'm sure if there was someone who was compromised, immune compromised, or however you put it from your health standpoint, I'm sure the nurse would make sure that he or she dug a little bit deeper into this and said, you know what, this child's not going into a classroom unless we can be sure. And that's my take. I mean, from a legal standpoint, I don't know how that happens, but I'm sure there's going to be a larger conversation that's going to take place coming out of the nurse's office regarding that.
We have had situations throughout the years that I've been in Auburn with immunocompromised kids for a variety of reasons, and there's a lot of extensive
Yeah.
work that goes into that particular classroom and anyone that child's going to be exposed to
Sure.
to make sure that we're keeping the child as safe as possible.
Great.
And I do agree, I think these numbers are higher. We had some of the football team when the time came, and they're like, oh, well, I'm vaccinated. Well, okay, well, we don't know that, And I think there are a lot of kids like that, that they are, and staff as well. They're just not, I don't know what it is, but they're just not sharing. So we're going to keep poking at it.
Yeah, and I think the other element that makes this conversation more difficult, well, I shouldn't say more difficult, makes the conversation a little more tenuous is now you're starting to see vaccinated people flip positive. And so you're hearing, so that's the other side of this too, is you get people who say, well, it's fine, I can get vaccinated, but I can still be positive, and still be subject to the same other elements of it. So it's just not an either or situation. It's just very difficult. It's very complicated. At this point, we're just going to continue to move through it, but it's difficult. There's no way about it. No two ways about it.
And just to echo Ms. Holloway's sentiments, yeah, you have my full support, and I think you have the full support of this committee. No matter what goes down, we know that you are always trying to do what's best for students, what's best for the residents, what's best for all involved. So, for the few people that try to come at us, come at the district, come at the school committee, or come at any of our staff, including yourself, Dr. Chamberlain, and the entire staff, shame on them. Because, as I said, there's going to be things that we agree with and disagree, and that goes out throughout the town. This is a very divisive issue, but in the end, as I said a few meetings ago, we're always trying to do what we think is best. So if you disagree with that, that's fine, but try to be respectful.
Yeah,
Yep. Thank you for that, Mr. Scobie.
absolutely.
Okay, moving on.
Test and stay. Finally. So we began last Wednesday. These numbers are already, I had to have this into Mandy last week, but we're well over 200 tests having been conducted in the schools. It's working very well. Kids come into school, they go right to the test and stay area. The staff has been there to conduct the tests. Staff is available throughout the day, so we have had situations where around 11 o'clock, we find out that there's, someone at home reporting they're positive. They might have been in school the day before. We're identifying the close contacts. If we have consent or can get consent from the family to test them, they go right down and they begin the testing process. So, I hate to say it, but so far so good, and it's really keeping a lot of kids in school.
Good.
And largely negative. We did have one student test positive today through the Test and Stay program. Student was isolated, removed from the school. They'll now get a PCR test because these are rapid tests, right? So they're not the most reliable. They'll get a PCR test, and then we'll see where we go with the student after that. So it's just gone really swimmingly well, honestly.
Yeah, it has.
I hate to even say it because I feel like I'm going to jinx it, but the staff has been great. The nurses have a system for getting them the names they need to test and getting the kids down. So everybody's chipped in, and it's really, 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 really helped to keep our kids in school. So
Good.
that's a good thing to report.
That was one piece that I left out, is that that's really the bottom line. Outside of us trying to do what's best for everyone, we always have the best intentions, but that's our number one goal, is keeping the students in school. That's it. That's all we've ever wanted to do. So we're doing it the best way that we know how. That's it. We don't know a better way. You might think you have a better way. We're following whatever science that we believe is the most accurate, and that is going to keep the kids in school. So that's just another point that I forgot to make before. You just made it for me. Thank you.
Let's keep our schools open, that's what we're all
Yeah,
about.
exactly, yep.
Well, and, you know, we can't forget that, like, that's keeping our children fed, because last year we had a mechanism in place to get food at home to kids that couldn't come into school. We don't have that in place now, so, you know, there's more than just math class, that, you know, there's a lot of services.
Agreed.
That's it for me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And now, after what was a little bit somber of a conversation, we're going to pick it up a little bit. Business and financial.
Okay, we're going to start dancing. Good evening, everyone. So for the business and financial report tonight, I have before you a copy in your packets of the 2027 capital improvement plan. As the town does, we have a 5-year capital improvement plan. So we're starting for fiscal year 2023, starting to work on the budget and getting ready for 2023 to happen. And so they wanted 2027. Mr. Fahey and I had provided the 2027 CIP, and as requested by the town manager, and just it requires your approval. So we put this together for 2027.
I would entertain that motion.
Make a motion to approve the 2027 CIP as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Okay, and next I have the 2023 CIP. Basically, it's just an update. There were a few changes in the language. We're no longer going to be leasing items like iPads and copy machines. We will now be buying them outright, so I wanted to just correct that language, because that's the 2023 that we'll be voting at May town meeting for CIP. And I also need your approval on that as well.
I would entertain that motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the 2023 CIP as presented with changes.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Okay, thank you. We'll send those 2027 and 2023 over to the town as requested tomorrow morning. Next is a year-to-date budget report as of October 14th that I provided in your packet with the budget as it is that day. I have budget transfers as well, some between the same series, and there's some between different series requiring your approval. We're just trying to clean up the budget and make adjustments for staff that have been moved, and with grant paid positions and adjusting that way. So that's what the transfers are about.
I would entertain that motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfers between the series as presented.
Second?
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
That's my
you.
report.
Excellent report. Dr. Hanfield, did you have anything else?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you. That is it for this evening.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. Good night, everyone.